know, the last couple of days, you might have seen a push from the usual suspects to give off this perception of Deontay Wilder that doesn't actually align with the history of boxing itself. They're making comparisons to Muhammad Ali, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
They'll say anything.
They're making comparisons to Mike Tyson.
Sign a contract,
and
boy.
This revisionist version of history, this narrative that they're perpetuating, is only really convincing to the casual observer, the one that knows nothing about the sport beyond the highlights you can look up on YouTube, but doesn't know the context of all these different matches, all these different fighters, their records, and how they stack up with Wilder's and how Wilder's stacks up with theirs. I mean, Deontay Wilder is a fighter with a whole lot of fucking knockouts, but how many of them actually came over top competition? I mean, before you go comparing him to the Alis, the Tysons, those kinds of fighters, before you go comparing him to them...
Who did he really beat?
How many of these sensational, titillating knockouts that he's racked up came over the kind of competition that they fought? You know?
Do a head count.
It's well known in boxing circles that as a fighter steps up in competition, the knockouts are harder to come by, because you're fighting fighters that have the kind of skills that can offset your power and the kind of fighters that can work around it. You know, those kinds of fighters, that as you step up in class, you're facing more well-rounded boxers with a more variable skill set that are malleable in a variety of situations. I mean, that's what happens. You know, One-Time Thurman, for example, he stopped being one-time a long time ago. Yeah, you know. You know, Errol Spence, he's supposed to be this boogeyman. He fights a quality guy in Mikey Garcia, right?
Right.
He's a quality guy, just not at 147, but better still, Mikey Garcia is a quality guy, and what happens? Errol couldn't knock him out.
He's a lightweight.
I mean, he goes from that, he goes into the Sean Porter fight, and there were overzealous fans saying that Spence was going to knock out Sean Porter. I told these guys, nobody has an easy night with Sean Porter. Nobody. You know, these guys still thought that Errol was going to knock him out, and what happens? He doesn't knock him out. He knocks him down, that's good, but Broner knocked him down. The expectation for a Spence is, you know, at least amongst his fans, was that he was going to knock him out. That didn't happen, because as you step up in class, the knockouts really are harder to come by. We apply that formula to Deontay Wilder, and the truth reveals itself that, well, hold on a second. Yeah, he's got like, what, 40-something knockouts, something like that? Yeah. But how many of them came over quality competition, you know?
How many?
In the roughly 10 or 11 years that Deontay Wilder has been a pro boxer, he's only actually ever fought 3 bona fide top 10 fighters in the division. Not just the WBC's top 10, not just the WBAs or the IBFs or the WBOs, not the Alphabet's top 10, because the rating system can be manipulated. It can. I mean, that's how Dominic Breazeale ended up getting a title fight ahead of Dillian Whyte, even though Dillian Whyte was ranked ahead of him. You know? We're talking about the division's top 10. The 10 best fighters in the entire weight class, regardless of which alphabet organization ranks them. Out of that short list of fighters, Deontay Wilder in the last 10 years, you know, 10 years, 10, 11 years.
10 fucking years.
Something like 40-something knockouts. In that duration of time, throughout a fluctuating, ever-changing top 10 ranked standing, because the same guys that are in the top 10 now aren't the same guys that were in the top 10 a couple of years ago and a couple of years before that. It has changed. But throughout all of these changes, and I've mentioned this before, I've covered this and shown the historical proof. Out of an ever-changing top 10, Deontay Wilder has only fought but 3 top 10 fighters in the last 10 years.
That's it.
Now, out of the 3, he only actually ever beat 2. And out of the 2, he only actually ever knocked out 1. That's right, that's not my opinion. That's not an anecdote. That is a simple matter of fact. It is. You see, when Deontay Wilder fought Bermane Stiverne, who was the WBC champion when they locked horns for the first time, you know, Bermane was a top 10 fighter, but Wilder didn't knock him out. He beat him in one-sided fashion, he did. But he didn't knock him out.
Went to the cards.
You know, he didn't knock him out. That fight went 12 rounds.
Did y'all forget?
Tyson Fury. The second top 10 fighter, bona fide top 10 fighter, that Deontay Wilder didn't knock out. That fight went to the cards, folks. I know the usual suspects want to convince themselves that the count was too long, that he really got a knockout. You can do that shit all day, but on the fucking books, and to the rest of the world who feels Fury won that fight, better still, regardless of who you think won it, it went to the cards. That was not a knockout for Deontay Wilder, and that is the second top 10 fighter. 2 out of the 3 that Wilder didn't knock out, yet he's supposed to be this mythical
knockout artist.
Puncher, this mythical knockout artist. In fact, the only top 10 fighter that Deontay Wilder has knocked out in his entire 11-year pro career, the only one, is the guy that he just knocked out again in Luis Ortiz. That's the only top 10 fighter that he knocked out. Because Bermane Stiverne wasn't a top 10 fighter in the rematch. You know, that's when he knocked out Stiverne, in the rematch. But we all know that Stiverne wasn't a top 10 fighter in that rematch. Guy was inactive for roughly 2 years or something like that. Wasn't a top 10 guy. But that is when Wilder finally knocked him out, isn't it? When he wasn't a top 10 guy. When he was fatter, slower, older, not in the top 10. That guy really didn't even deserve a title shot, but he got one. And you know, that's when Wilder finally knocked him out.
Pretty much.
When he wasn't a top 10 fighter. I stress this because of what I said before. As you step up in class, you're dealing with fighters that might have a skill set similar to or greater than your own. And it is there
You will be tested.
that you have to prove whether or not you're everything people say you are. Yet Wilder's really only been there 3 times, and 2 out of the 3, he didn't knock the guy out. And you want to compare this guy to Mike Tyson?
Fuck off.
To Muhammad Ali? Let me tell you something. Even in the realm, if we relegate the conversation to just being a knockout artist, just
That by itself.
let's take Ali out of the equation, because I don't even think it's a question as to who really, is the greatest between Ali and Wilder. If we just stick to the knockouts, Mike Tyson has knocked out more champions, more top 10 opponents than Deontay Wilder by a wide margin. Now, the casual observer, the usual suspects, they don't know this because they weren't watching boxing long enough to know this, I mean, hell, some of these guys weren't even alive when a 20-year-old Mike Tyson, 20 years old, WBC heavyweight champion, when a 20-year-old Mike Tyson was making grown men, seasoned contenders, veterans, do the chicken dance. They're not going to know that.
Of course not.
You haven't been watching boxing long enough to know that. And it's for this reason they say this ignorant, stupid shit. They don't know that Mike fought more world champions and beat them than Deontay Wilder. These aren't just knockouts over Joe Tomato Can, patty potato salad.
You want some?
Okay? These are world champions and top 10 contenders in the world that Mike Tyson was icing. The kind of guys that here today, people are demanding that Deontay Wilder fight, but, he'd rather hide behind the politics. I mean, you've been around for 10 years and you only found the time to fight 3 top 10 fighters, and out of the 3, you only knocked out 1? And you're supposed to be a mythic puncher?
Give me a break.
But they want to compare this guy to Mike Tyson. That's what they want to do. So my question is, okay, has Deontay Wilder ever stopped a world champion in 3 rounds the way Mike did? 2 rounds how Mike did? You know that Mike Tyson stopped Trevor Berbick in the 2nd round of their fight. 20-year-old Mike stopped a grown man, world champion, reigning world champion, in the 2nd round. He stopped Trevor Berbick for the WBC in the 2nd round. He stopped Frank Bruno for the WBC in the 3rd round. He stopped Bruce Seldon for the WBA in the 1st round. That's 3 world champions that Mike Tyson has stopped, all before the half. Does Deontay Wilder got any of these kinds of knockouts, the way Mike's got them? Because context is key here. The usual suspects, they want to remove all context, remove all information, omit it to give you this illusion, gaslight you essentially, that somehow Deontay Wilder's on the level of Mike Tyson. Well, Mike Tyson was stopping world champions well before the half. Is Wilder doing that these days? And that's not even all the world champions that Mike Tyson beat. He actually beat 5 reigning world champions. Trevor Berbick for the WBC, James Bone Crusher Smith for the WBA, Tony Tucker for the IBF, Frank Bruno for the WBC again, and Bruce Seldon for the WBA. He stopped 3 of them well before the half and decisioned the other 2. That makes a grand total of 5 world champions that Mike Tyson beat. It's a hell of a lot more than Wilder's beat. He's only actually ever beat 1, and he had to decision that guy. I'd wager that in a time machine, not that I like these kinds of conversations, but better still, if we're going to go the anecdotal route that these guys love to go, I'd wager that a game Frank Bruno would beat Bermane Stiverne. I'd wager that a game James Smith, James Bone Crusher Smith, a game Tony Tucker, hell, a game James Quick Tillis would beat the Bermane Stiverne that Wilder fought. It's almost like people forgot that, Bermane Stiverne had actually already been stopped before Wilder even fought him. That's right, he was stopped in 4 rounds by Demetrius King. These guys don't know that. They ain't been watching boxing that long. Of course they're not going to know that. Of course they don't got no context. He fights Wilder, when Bermane had the belt, defends it against Wilder, it goes to the cards. Wilder didn't knock him out. And that's the only active reigning world champion on Wilder's resume. That's the only one. Mike's beaten like 5 of those, and you want to compare Wilder to Mike? He's got 5 of those. Out of the 5, he stopped 3. And out of the 3, every single one of those 3 got stopped before the half. You want to compare this guy? I don't get it. I mean, what all-time greats are you going to find on Wilder's resume? He's 41 fights in, 41, 42, something like that. 41, 42 fights in, 10, 11 years as a professional. What Hall of Famers are you going to find in his resume? Who's his Larry Holmes? Who's his Michael Spinks the Jinx? You know, that one win over Spinks is better than anything you're going to find on Wilder's resume. Spinks was undefeated. Undefeated. Okay, took on Jerry Cooney. Okay? A lot smaller than that guy. Took him on. Takes on the Eastern Assassin, Larry Holmes. Decisions him 2 times. Goes the distance. Goes to the cards. Okay? Goes to the cards. This same Michael Spinks that went the distance with Larry Holmes doesn't make it out of the first round with Mike Tyson, because that's the kind of knockout artist that he was. That's the kind of puncher that he was. The kind of puncher that Wilder ain't. Larry Holmes had never been stopped up until he fought Mike Tyson. And don't give me the Larry was old crap, because Luis Ortiz is old. The difference is Larry Holmes is an ATG and Luis Ortiz is not. Larry Holmes was a world champion and Luis Ortiz is not, nor has he ever been.
Likely never will be.
Larry Holmes is a Hall of Famer, you know? It's Larry fucking Holmes. You're gonna compare Luis Ortiz to Larry Holmes? Is that what we're gonna do now? Who's Deontay Wilder's Larry Holmes? Who's his Michael Spinks the Jinx? Ooh, you tell me. When I see these comparisons to Deontay Wilder and Mike Tyson, they must be comparing highlight reels, because they surely aren't comparing their records. They're comparing highlight reels. That's what they're doing, because the extent of their knowledge of boxing is really limited to what you can find in a highlight reel. These guys don't actually know the sport, otherwise they would have never been comparing those 2 guys. There's no comparison between Mike Tyson, the knockout artist, the pay-per-view attraction, the electrifying fighter that at one point most of the country was behind, and, you know, he's a cultural icon. And not just to Americans. That's who Mike Tyson is. That's who he was. That's who he is. And you're comparing Wilder to this guy? For beating who? You know, you could conjure up Donovan Ruddock. The same Donovan Ruddock that Mike Tyson beat 2 times. You could conjure up that guy in a time machine, okay? You put him in today's heavyweight division and make him fight the guys that Wilder fought, and I put my money on Donovan Ruddock. The same guys that Wilder knocked out. The same exact guys. Donovan Ruddock would likely beat those kinds of guys, because Wilder was fighting pedestrian-level competition for at least the first 7 years of his pro career, okay? And that's who most of these quote-unquote knockouts came over. Joe Tomato Can and Patty Potato Salad.
The Henry Heavy Bags.
You got the usual suspects peddling this propaganda. Saying things like, you know, Anthony Joshua's weird because he says he doesn't regret his losses. That's weird to these guys, you know? That's weird. It's not weird that Wilder wanted to get pregnant and said this in full view of the public, full view of the boxing community. It's not weird that Wilder wants to get pregnant, and as soon as the technology becomes available, he's gonna do it. He wants to get pregnant by his girlfriend. That's not weird to them. Joshua's saying what he said is weird. These are the guys that are peddling this propaganda, so ask yourself, should you really take into consideration anything that these guys have got to say? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, all the facts, they actually do check out. So a lot of this is truth, not anecdotes. Better still, if this is the case, then why are these guys going so hard for Wilder? Why are they on this guy's dick like that? What's going on? Why are they so hell-bent on gaslighting everyone and fooling them into thinking that he's something that he's not? It's because Wilder speaks to the kinds of individuals that they are. Perhaps not the entirety of the boxing community, certainly not the country, and certainly not the world. But Wilder speaks to who they are because of his traits as an individual, what we see from him. The indecisiveness, the lying, the clout chasing, the feelings of self-entitlement. You know, all that stuff is stuff that those guys identify with. Thus, they see someone similar to themselves in this situation, and they want to push him. They want to carry him to new and greater heights. So they feel so inclined to develop these narratives, these lies, that somehow he's on the level of fighters who, in all honesty, he's not worthy to carry their spit bucket. You think Wilder's done for boxing what Mike Tyson did for boxing?
Get the fuck out of here.
I mean, whether we're talking about world champions defeated, top contenders defeated, titles unified, Mike Tyson was an undisputed champion, folks. He was a 2-time heavyweight champion. That's an even shorter list. You know, a lot of guys, they lose that title, you know, really get it back. It's hard. It's very difficult. You know, this is Mike Tyson we're talking about. Lineal and undisputed heavyweight champion. One of the biggest pay-per-view draws pay-per-view has ever seen. And you're comparing Wilder and what? His 325 buys in his draw with Tyson Fury to that guy? So for this reason they do this. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but Wilder doesn't make a lot of sense. So why would his fans? Now, in the spirit of fairness and objectivity, which we often promote here on the channel, the good news is for Wilder and his fans is that his career's not over. There's still room for him to add to his legacy so that maybe what he's done will be able to hold a candle to the things that a fighter like Mike Tyson has done. Wilder's not retired. He's still active. If he were to beat Tyson Fury, hypothetically speaking, if he beats Tyson Fury in the rematch, and he beats the winner of Joshua versus Ruiz too, and he has a couple of title defenses, if he unifies all the belts, well then there would be a precedence to say that not only was this guy a knockout artist, but he was very accomplished. He accomplished quite a bit. He might have done it later in his career, but if he were to do these things, he would get the credit, the same credit that I'm giving here today to Mike Tyson. But it's because those are things that Mike actually did. I don't gotta do the woulda, coulda, shoulda with Mike and what he did so far in his career. I don't gotta do that. I know he beat 5 active reigning world champions. I know that he was the lineal and undisputed Ring Magazine champion. I know these things. I know that he was a 2-time heavyweight champion, that even after losing the belt, he got it back. Okay? I know these things. I don't know these things about Wilder because he hasn't done them yet. So if by some chance he moves on from what he's done so far and he adds the name of Fury to people that he's beaten, you know, to the list of people that he's beaten, and maybe he fights the winner of Joshua versus Ruiz too. Maybe he beats them. You know, maybe he has a couple of title defenses over top contenders. When all those things come to pass, then and only then will it make sense for you to compare him to Mike Tyson. But as it stands here today, no, that makes no sense. Here in November of 2019, it makes absolutely no fucking sense to compare what Wilder's done to what Mike Tyson has done, both on his record and for the sport. Now, Wilder's given himself another 6 years before he calls it a career, before he calls it quits. And there are talks of potentially surpassing Rocky Marciano's unbeaten record, 49-0, no blemishes. Now, Wilder's going to struggle with that because he's got that draw on there, that draw that most people, myself included, think really should be a loss. But better still, I'll tell you what, if Wilder makes it to 50-0 or 51-0, if he beats Tyson Fury, beats the winner of Joshua versus Ruiz too, has a couple of title defenses of what could be the undisputed heavyweight championship, and he makes it to 50-0, even with the draw, I would say, yeah, you know, his record's comparable, it's respectable. But at the end of the day, you hear how it sounds, you see it's a tall ask, you know how they've been moving him, his handlers, and you gotta ask yourself, is he really gonna get to that point? If he does, he'll get the credit. But until he does, he ain't no fucking Mike Tyson.